Welcome to Busted Speakers. This is Alex.
And I'm Lee.
Yes, from Lee Likes Music, helpfully joining me again. And this is something a bit new. It's still an album review, but it's not a new album. It's part one of a new series of videos I'll be hopefully trying to do with different people. Maybe the same people. We'll see what happens over the coming weeks. But it's random album review where on a site called Rate Your Music, which I believe is the most reliable music database. It has a randomizer, and just every so often we'll do a random album review. Whatever's generated, we have to do it, or that's at least the idea of it. Yeah, so today we're reviewing a jazz album from 2004, Rick Braun Sessions Volume 1. I don't know much about Rick Braun. Do you know anything about him? I know a little bit.
I had never heard of him before, and when I looked him up on Wikipedia and Spotify, I couldn't really say that I got any bells ringing at all. So, kind of exciting to check out new artists, though.
Yeah, I mean, he has been going on since the early 90s. He plays the trumpet. He basically hasn't captured a lot of jazz heads because I think it's not unfair to say the 90s and the 2000s, they're not the biggest era for jazz. Let's be honest. The 60s, 70s, 50s, jazz was much more of a bigger genre then
Yep,
than it was
those were the
in the
heydays.
90s and 2000s. They were the heydays. I mean, you get people like Kamasi Washington with the Epic. If you've heard of that album, it's getting people back into jazz a bit. But really, it hasn't. It's past its heyday. So I was thinking, what will a jazz album from 2004 even sound like? But I mean,
Yeah,
do you want to say your
I can
opinion quickly?
I actually love this album as far as I can say. I haven't listened to this album too much, so I can't go in depth. But what I heard was quite playful, quite intricate, and very simple in some ways. And yeah, it was something that I could put on and I could intuitively listen to it, and I could resonate with it in that way, and I could also put it on in and listen to it in a very attentive mode, and I could
Yeah.
like it in that way as well. So this catered to my musical tastes really, and I'm not a big jazz fan. I've listened to Miles Davis, who is a very one of the more
Yeah.
famous jazz heads, jazz fusionists, or whatever you want to call them. Um, but yeah, this was quite good. Although it wasn't the most experimental thing I've ever heard, it was very satisfying.
Okay. Well, I'm not really too sure. This is this was tagged, or the genre for this was smooth jazz. But really, I thought it was a lot more funky than that in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's
And
very true. There
yeah,
was some funk songs, funk fusions here as well.
jazz fusion, yeah.
Yeah.
And I cannot fault the production at all. There's a level of like perfection to it. Although maybe it's uh, getting rid of a lot of gritty character the album could have. But the playing is so good, so solid, and it makes it much closer to a Miles Davis sort of thing than a Kenny G type of thing, who what is not regarded as one of the best jazz musicians ever.
Hmm. So you
So
so you,
yes,
you think you think it was as talented as some of the biggest ones?
not quite. I like how these songs maintain a vibe the whole way through. Like the songs don't really go in too many directions, but the fact that it doesn't change it up too much, which might sound like a good thing. I mean, I don't know. There's some. I kind of didn't get too bored with it, but I don't know. There's some parts, like you were saying in your note writing on the Shakira album, sometimes you wrote just boring.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had to write that here because on some of these songs, because honestly, like, although it sounded nice and playing was good, sometimes I just didn't find it interesting, and I don't know why, but sometimes it just didn't
Okay.
spark my interest. I am not a jazz fan in particular, but I can listen to really good experimental jazz. I think that's my problem. I haven't. got a base level of enjoyment for jazz. I go to a lot of experimental jazz first, so maybe that's my problem. Because this is a very, very easy accessible album. Let's be honest, like it's not too hard to get into.
No, I guess for people who are used to more, how can I put it, more intricate stuff, this
Yeah.
would be maybe a bit too simple. It's like I don't want to compare this to any rough subjects, but it's like taking a drug. If you're used to hard drugs and you're taking lighter drugs, it would be like what is this? You know?
Well, I think that's a pretty reasonable comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean, it could also be like, oh, I love strong cheese, but this light cheese is not good for me. I don't know, something like
We're
that.
I feel like we sound like
It's
we're
a weird
overly
comparison.
simplifying. Yeah, we're overly simplifying the analysis, so to speak, of this album. But hey,
Okay, well, there was one song that I thought was really, really
yeah.
great, and it was Philadelphia, because this has a
Mm.
guest musician called Jeff Golab on it, who I think added a lot of swagger, and there must be at least two guitarists on this track, because the guitar interplays with the saxophone so well. There's some great chemistry on here that I felt a lot more than any other song. It doesn't feel loose or freeform. Like, it makes me feel like the whole album's quite well honed in practice. Like, there isn't a lot of free improvisation, sort of. That's how I felt anyway. There probably is.
Yeah.
But this song is basically only really great because of the guitar. And I think that's just because I'm more of a rock fan than a jazz fan. I think I identify with the guitar more than anything else. And even though Rick Braun, the man who made this album, who's credited as making the album, is a saxophonist, I usually think he's pretty good, but there's usually other elements I like more. So yes, that song, Philadelphia, was pretty good. And there was another song, Love Will Find a Way, that had vocals, if you remember that one. The one song on the album that had vocals.
I should be able to remember it, but I think I fell asleep by then.
Well, I have to say, in my notes, I was like, oh, this is the same as each other song. Wait, vocals. Fucking
What the
vocals? What
fuck?
is this?
Is this
I
even
was
jazz
thinking
now?
that.
Is this like
Yeah,
some pop jazz like fusion thingy?
AOR, vocal jazz. Uh, I can't tell who's singing this. It might be Rick, but it's nothing amazing. It was just something different,
Yeah.
and some of my notes I was just having a laugh. Like, I wasn't taking it too seriously. Like, there's a song called Coolsville, the last song, and I said I'll decide what's cool.
Yeah, what a track name in the first place. Coolsville. It's like
Yeah,
it's like the only thing that I can picture in my mind is some 13-year-olds who think they're the best at playing jazz, and they're like, what should we call this song? It's like the best song in the world, you know. We're gonna win this contest. Oh, we'll call it Coolsville. That's a great
yeah, that
name.
was actually okay. That
Yeah.
song was
I,
actually
I,
okay.
I I
Yeah.
actually can't remember it, but I just want to add that to me, as a person who really hasn't listened to that much jazz from before, I mean, the only couple of artists that I've listened to is Miles Davis. I've heard Yaga Assists, which is a Norwegian jazz band. Listened a little bit to them,
Right.
and I've also listened to Flying Lotus. He is more of an
Oh yeah,
experimental
yeah.
guy, but he also mixes jazz into his music. And I don't know, I really tended to lean and gravitate towards the trumpet here because I'm not used to hearing and listening to music that features like air instruments. Or I've listened to a bit of flute music, but not that much
Yeah.
trumpet and air instruments. I don't know what you call it. What's the word for it? Air instruments?
Wind section, I
Yeah,
think,
wind section. Yeah. So
in the orchestra.
yeah, so for me, this was really fresh, and although it wasn't that complicated and intricate, I still managed to enjoy it. But then again, I have to say that this is a very superficial and first take on the album for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, the problem with that random album review, we have to keep moving.
Yeah,
We don't know what we're gonna get. We have to keep on moving. New music. There's millions of albums to check out, so we can't dedicate all of our lives to one album. But
true.
I have to say, I have checked out a lot of jazz, like more than I've cared to admit. I'm just not the hugest fan. Like I've checked out Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, a few others, Alice Coltrane, who was John Coltrane's wife, Pharoah
Yeah.
Sanders, and even like Art Blakey, who was a drummer, but he was still the leader of the band. I've
Well, what
noticed
would you
that jazz, it doesn't
compare?
matter what. Sorry.
Do you have anyone that you could compare to Rick Braun though? Who is most similar to him?
Um. Right. I'd have to say, kind of jazz fusion era Miles Davis, like the late '60s, early '70s
Okay.
Miles Davis. Maybe a little bit of Herbie Hancock, who was making jazz very trendy because there was a lot of funky guitar, like on here actually. So maybe a bit of Headhunters, which is a good album to check out. Headhunters. You might have seen the
We'll
album
leave
cover.
links
It's a
below.
great. Yeah, I'll just wreck it to you after this, but um, I have to say that also another jazz rock band, Chicago, who are more well known for soft rock in the '80s or just pop music. They started out as a heavy jazz rock outfit. Some of this reminds me of that. Um, and the sad thing is, like, I just, I don't know. I just found this a little bit too chilled, a little bit too clinical, um, sterile almost. Like, I don't know. It just didn't have a lot of raw experimentation for me. It definitely felt a bit too schmaltzy. I don't know. It's weird because the playing's really good on this album. It didn't connect with me, and I've listened to it twice, and I don't know. It just didn't. But I have to say, the track Philadelphia and even Cadillac Slim, the first song, which is what alerted me to the fact this is quite funky. The album does have some moments. I'll give it that.
All right. So shall we round up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What would you rate it, Alex?
I'm gonna give it a 5 because it was really well played and pretty good, but if something doesn't spark my interest that much, I mean, it's not never gonna get that high of a rating from me. So a 5, it's pretty decent. It's definitely pretty good for background listening. And like you said earlier, you probably can focus in on some of this. Like there are quite a lot of good bass and drum aspects to the album, but it didn't really interest me that much. But I mean, is this what jazz is like in the 2000s? Maybe it's really hasn't been in its heyday.
Maybe this album is one of the best albums of the 90s. We just don't know.
Yeah, I think it was released in 2004,
Okay.
but who knows? Yeah, I think it was. I'm not too. Yeah, I'll check now. It is, but who knows? The fact that it's called Sessions Volume 1 makes it sound like it's taken from really old sessions.
Yeah,
So who knows when they're recorded?
maybe it's a compilation album or something.
Yeah.
Damn,
So
Alex,
what would you
do
rate it?
do your research. um,
No, it is 2004 new. I was just yeah.
yeah. I'm just joking because I just listened to this album one time, and my
Yeah,
rating,
it's okay.
first impression rating, I would give it a 7 out of 10 because
Pretty good.
yeah, that's I just man, when I put this album on, it was the best record I've listened to in quite a long time that actually
Wow.
put me to sleep. So
Oh,
so you can interpret that in whatever way you want. Maybe that is a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but that is at least what I got from it, and yeah, I liked it, man.
right. Well, if anyone enjoyed this, well, hopefully. We're gonna hopefully continue random album review. Uh, pretty, pretty soon. Like, I mean, there's no stress. Wouldn't have anyone requesting these albums probably. I mean, we could get a new release, but it's unlikely given how many there are. So you can probably never predict what we're gonna get. And yeah, so stick around. We might get a really famous album. We might just keep getting obscure jazz albums. Oh dear. Well, hopefully we get stuff in other. Hopefully we get stuff in other genres. And if you enjoyed this series, let us know. Comment below. Thanks for listening to episode 1. I guess it's still another album review, but make it a sort of new series of random album reviews. I've been Alex, with Lee from Lee Likes Music. Check out his channel. I'll leave a link below. And yeah, check us out on social media. Bye, guys.
Bye.